All right, so last week we talked about discipleship, and we started our, we talked about how that we live in a world where we are called to go and be disciples for Christ. And as we get into this, we're looking at Christ meets us where we're at, and he changes us from there. And that's what we're talking about this week. And we're going to look at some stories as we go through here. The passage we're going to look at today deals with Philip and Nathanael and their calling, and that Jesus met them where they're at, and how that their callings, although they were two different ones, they both resulted in the same result ultimately. So as we think about it, you think about it, Jesus wants us, right? He wants us to be his disciples. Y'all probably through either history class or through movies or other areas have seen that, sign from World War I era, where it was Uncle Sam dressed in, his outfit and said, I want you for the U.S. Army. We've all seen that. That's from where it started out and came out originally in World War I. It actually originally wasn't meant to be a recruitment poster. It was originally meant to be the cover for a magazine, for some magazine, talking about preparedness. But, it was printed about 4 million times between 1917 and 1918. And the World War I ended in 1918. And then it was printed again whenever the U.S. entered the war in December of 1941. And so, the creator of it later declared that probably was the most famous poster in the world. And you think about it, here we are 100 years later, we're still recognize and know that poster. It's familiar to us, we know it. One reason that it's retained its popularity is because of what it signifies. You think about it. What does it really signify? It calls to a deeper connection to our nation. It calls to us, you look at the colors that are on there, right? It calls to our flag, red, white, and blue. It's got the stars, the stripes. It really calls to our sense of patriotism, and it calls us to remember, our national identity, but to participate in those things, to defend those against people who would want those taken away from us. And it calls us to defend our way of life and to stand up for what we believe in. We see that the same way. Jesus wants us. He calls us out in the same way. He wants us. Now, it's not necessarily he goes out, he wants to recruit us. Not necessarily in the same way, but he recruits us to be his disciples. And anyone who becomes a disciple, who becomes a Christian, he recruits to be a disciple of his. And we see this in the Bible. He actively searches for followers, and he calls them into the mission field with him, to serve with him, to change the mission for the world. And he's still recruiting disciples today. He's still calling people to go into the world. He's calling us to go where he's placed us, to share the gospel with others. It doesn't have to be complex. But he's calling us to go and share our faith, to share what Jesus has done for us with others. In the early days of his ministry, Jesus gathered a number of disciples around him. It wasn't a whole lot, it was a few. But, he intended for those men to follow him during that day and to learn from him and to contribute to his ministry. And we're going to look at John chapter 1, and we're going to read verse 43 through 51. And this is actually a continuation from where we were at last week, because we finished up in verse 42 last week. So here's the next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. And he said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So we see in that passage that, Philip was the first one called. He said he had a direct relationship, had a direct call from Jesus. Jesus came to him and said, follow me. Like I said, it's two different callings that we see with Philip and Nathanael. But both are just as valid, both are important. And it just shows that there's no one way for us to be called to be a disciple. There's no one way for us to come to Christ. There's no one clear-cut way for someone to be saved. Everyone's salvation can be different because each person may have different obstacles that they have to overcome. And we see Nathanael had more obstacles to overcome. We'll look at that more here in a second. The first step to becoming a disciple is to have the meaningful, deep encounter with Jesus. No one inherits that relationship from their parents. No one inherits that relationship from their parents. No one earns the status of a disciple by attending church, doing good things, or not doing bad things. None of those things earned you that. You earn that by having that encounter by that. Jesus comes to you, comes through you, through the Holy Spirit, and changes your lives. We become disciples of Christ when we experience Him in a way that changes our lives. That's how we become disciples. Not through anything we do, as far as coming to church, or not by anything our parents do. It's by us. We have to have ourselves. Is the only way we can have that experience. As I mentioned, looking at John 1, 43 to 51, we see that they experienced them in different ways. Philip receives a direct call. Jesus came to him and said, follow me. And Philip followed him. We see that. Philip was excited about this. He was excited about the fact that he had this experience. He had this encounter. He wanted to go and tell others. So he went out and he found Nathanael. So he went out and he found Nathanael. Nathanael, on the other hand, was a little more skeptical. He needed a little more proof. He went out, and as we see here in our passage, Nathanael scoffed at the idea that Jesus was the Messiah. He was like, nothing good can come out of Nazareth. Nazareth was a little town, insignificant, really, in all Israel. So he was like, nothing good can come out of there. So even when he met Jesus, Nathanael challenged him. He didn't believe that he really was true. He asked Jesus, how do you know me? And Jesus answered and told him how when Philip met him, he knew that's what happened. And that just goes to show you there's nothing wrong with someone questioning, wanting to know to make sure. Because, Nathanael was stubborn, right? We see that. Nathanael was stubborn. And fortunately, Nathanael, stubbornness did not prevent him from becoming a convert. Did not prevent him from following Christ. His stubbornness did not prevent him from becoming to the point of unbelief, to where he just didn't believe at all. When Jesus revealed himself in a supernatural way, Nathanael submitted himself. He became a follower of Christ. He said, you are the Son of God. He said that acknowledging that Jesus was the Messiah, the King of Israel. He acknowledged that fact. Like I said, this tells us there's no template, there's no one way for us to say, okay, this is how you come to be a disciple of Christ, to become a Christian. There's no one clear path. Everyone has a different path that they do to get there. That's where you become transformed by the gospel to become a Christian. We noted earlier that, the first steps in becoming a disciple is encountering Him. Is encountering Jesus. And we see that with Philip and Nathanael. Both of them had experiences. Both were different in a way. But yet they both were. Philip responded with his encounter by immediately going and finding someone else to tell. Someone he wanted everyone he knew and cared about to know about his experience. To know what had happened in his life. To know that he had been changed. To know that he had been transformed. And he wanted them to have a similar encounter so that he knew that they would have the same experience they had. He was transformed into an evangelist someone who would go out and tell others almost instantly. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. You know, some Christians, you know, we should all be willing to do that right away. It's difficult at times. We miss that so many times as Christians. We think that we're not mature enough as Christians to go out and tell others about Christ. You know, we feel that we have to mature in our faith to become better Christians. But, you know, we really don't have to. Too many times people remain silent about their faith whenever they're young because they don't want to be seen as weird, or they don't want to impose their beliefs on others. But, you know, that's just not it is. The truth is that when we experience something new, or when we experience changes in our lives, we just can't stop sharing the good news. It's just like with anything in our lives. Whenever you have something exciting going on in your lives, you just can't stop sharing it, right? I mean, y'all are going through driver's ed. Y'all enjoy sharing it. I mean, you're sharing it on Instagram all the time, or frequently. You know, talking about it. You know, so I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing or anything like that, but you're ready to get your permit. You are, and you are too. You know, y'all are excited about that. We're talking about that. I mean, you know, what the first thing you came up to me and said, "Oh, you missed it. I drove around the cemetery today." You know, I mean, so you know, you're excited about that. You wanted to tell me about that. That's how we need to be as Christians, right? With our faith, we need to be willing to share our faith and our experience with others in the same way we share everything. I mean, whenever Hannah Joy was born, I told everybody, right? Because that was a big thing in our life. Whenever we found out Holly was pregnant, I wanted to tell everybody. I couldn't. We didn't. Because, you know, we wanted to wait till we got to a certain point to make sure, you know, nothing was going to go wrong. But we wanted to, you know, I wanted to tell everybody. That's just how we are. And we need to be that same way when we are as Christians with our faith. Nathaniel was also changed by his encounter. You know, he was challenged. He challenged everything. But after his face-to-face encounter with Jesus, he changed. And he responded with genuine worship. You know, and we see this, you know, this was just the beginning of their faith. This was just the beginning of their walk. These two men, throughout their walk with Christ, were disciples of Christ. They walked with him. They transformed the church. They helped the early church. They served faithfully, even until death. In church tradition, they were even killed for their faith in Christ in the early church. Because around this time of the early church, when the church was starting to be formed, that's whenever Christians were persecuted in this area by Rome. And so many of the churches were persecuted. Christians were persecuted. So talking through your earliest encounter and through your testimony, through how you came to know Christ and your encounter with Christ, is a great way to share the gospel with others. And, you know, you don't need a fancy, you know, testimony or a miniature sermon to share your testimony or to share the gospel with somebody. You just need to tell them, you know, what you've experienced and how it's changed your life. You know, on page 28 in your books, you don't have to turn there, but, you know, as you go throughout this week, if you look on there, you'll see on there you have a space where you can go in. I want to challenge you to go in there this week, to go in there and fill it out. What it is go in there and talk about it and think about it. You know, what was your first encounter with Jesus? You know, your salvation encounter with Jesus. And how has it changed your life? You know, and let that be kind of a starting point for you to start to share your faith with others as you go throughout your life. As you go throughout this week and as you go through spring break next week, you know, you had a great opportunity next week to, you know, work on this. And then as you come back from spring break, to share with others what God has done for you.